All right, here we are. I want to say I started this at maybe 11 a.m. And it started off pretty warm, and then it started getting really cool. It kind of chilled out, and I probably left this out maybe an hour, maybe an hour and a half longer than it needed to. But that's sort of the beauty with working with dough, is you could sort of adapt it to your schedule, and based on the environment and everything like that, it still might work out. So it is now 10 o'clock, and I've been stretching and folding and doing that process I mentioned earlier about every 40 minutes to maybe an hour since then. Every 40 minutes to an hour. And here's what we have. Maybe you can get a better look here. So it's right around that area that I mentioned. It'd probably end up, if you see all those air pockets, it's a really good thing. It means that the it's going to release from the sides really, really easily, and that the those air pockets mean that there's a lot of air that's been incorporated. So good bulk fermentation, or initial proof, I should say. The second stage is bulk fermentation. So this is all still pretty wet, and as I mentioned before, we're going to flour this surface. I'm going to scoop this out. It's going to fall out pretty easily, and I'm going to divide it, separate it, flip it over, shape it, put some flour, the excess flour on top, and then I'm just going to throw this little bag on it again. So I don't know, what's that, maybe a quarter cup of flour. This sourdough is shockingly sticky, so you want probably a little bit more than you may think you need. And let's dump this out. You see how easily that releases from the side. It's not gooey. It's not a mess. Might have to wait for a little bit just because you have like an awkward angle, but as you can tell here, it'll slowly release itself. And if you're, in a hurry, you can just help it out by pulling it from the side like that. Long and short of it is, you don't want to tear that dough if you don't have to. So we've got a nice little lump here. And I could have slammed this just to sort of drive out a lot of the excess air here. If I would have plopped this really hard, or maybe pick up this block and drop it, it would settle slightly. But I have learned that just with working with it, it'll essentially do it itself. I don't know if you can hear that. Almost sounds like a hollow sort of sound to it because of all that air. I'm just eyeballing here. Some people might want to measure. You're welcome to. And this is what I was saying earlier. So the bottom is floured, right? You notice I'm not really managing it on the top because my hand's going to get sticky. A very, very, very little residual stickiness on my hand right now. But this will move around because of all that flour we put. So at this point, I'm probably going to set this to the side because I want something really solid. I'll just sort of kind of pick this up and begin sort of, what did I call it earlier? A dumpling. Sort of bringing those pieces onto itself. Not for any real technical reason. It'll just make it easier to flip. I'm going to push this flour out of the way because I do not want flour where it's not supposed to be, which is inside here. On the top, that's fine. On the inside, it's not fine. Don't make a big deal about it. Just try and get as much of that as you can out of the way, and then just flip it. So we were talking about shaping a while back and how it's kind of hard to explain. It's not something I can really teach you, with my words. It's something you're going to have to learn from experience, but you could sort of use this as your tension system. So let's see if I can get close here and you can see what I'm trying to explain is, if I push downwards and this way, you'll see the skin start to tighten. All right, so that's one way you can do it. Once you have enough experience, you could sort of just use your hand. I'm doing the same thing with my hand. Instead of coming from this direction, obviously my hand is on this side, so it's going to come from this direction. And then I'm doing the same thing. I'm going to pull this back towards me. My hand is pushing down. It's dragging, but I'm also developing that same sort of tension that this was coming this way. And then I'm just shoving it back the other way. Pulling it towards me, pushing it back the other way. It's very, very subtle, but as you can see here, it's starting to smooth out. It's still dry on top. It's not sticky. Right, my hand, this is just flour. There's no stickiness on my hands. And you'll start to notice these nice, lovely bubbles developing on top. I'm done. I could stop here. I'm just trying to like kind of give you an idea of what I'm doing. And that's it. So I'll try to give you a little close-up here. If you want to look underneath it, all this is sort of shoved into itself. I don't know if you heard that little bubble burst. You want to stop here when you're comfortable. This will spring back. Let's give you a good section to look at here. It'll spring back at you. It's not going to maintain your fingerprint, but this is all air. I don't know if you can see that. I imagine you can. This is air. This is air. This is air. This is all air. This is a great thing. It's good development. This is the same exact starter I've given all of you. And you want to stop, so I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, because what will happen is if I put too much tension on this, it'll just tear. It'll tear like, reminds me of like almost like a wet balloon. It'll just sort of split, and you'll see the underlying layer of dough. And when you've done that, you sort of shot yourself in the foot, so know when to stop. Like, less is more at this point. So I'll just sort of shove this in a corner, and I'm going to move on to my buddy over here. Hopefully you can see here, I'm not grabbing anything. I'm not like picking something up with my hands and like sinking my fingers into it. It's more about just touching. Like, I know from experience that if I could probably just move this with the stickiness, the tackiness of this dough, but if you look at my hand, it's not covered in dough, right? It's because I've got this medium here in the flour. So I'll do the same thing. Not necessary. There have been plenty of times where I'm in a rush and I'll just pick the whole thing up and I'll flip it over. But I'm trying to give you a sense of like, you're touching the dough, you're getting a feel for how to manage the dough, and you know how sticky and how dry and how smooth it should be. Like when people say, oh, when it's done, it'll be as smooth as a baby's butt. That could very well be true, but if you have a handful of flour and you go to touch something, it's not going to feel as smooth as a baby's butt. So it just teaches you to kind of get used to touching it and how it should feel. All right. All right, so we're trying to revisit this again. I'm pushing down, and I'm shoving this way, and I'm trying to see if I can get you a good picture of how this tension is developing. It's a little bit too much flour. So I'll just do this with the bench scraper this time. Notice I'm kind of giving it like these little half turns. And you'll see that this side is now on the bottom, and all we have is like this pretty side that was originally